See, smell an elephant, it probably is. And this applies to many products I see in the market. Now, at the moment, I'm finding that the Islamic industry is very disjointed. There's institutions all over the landscape, and there doesn't seem to be a great deal of coordination and communication. And often, I think this is down to the human nature. It's something that Barack Obama referred to the other week. He said, we often define ourselves by our differences. It's very easy to say, oh, they've got a different type of Islam to me, and I'm not going to use them. But there are some very good examples from history where you can combine very diverse views without compromising your own beliefs and create a portfolio effect to great benefit. And the military examples are several. For example, when Hannibal took on the Roman army before the time of the Prophet Isa, he used 7 different languages. His army had 7 different languages and many different skills, but by combining those diverse qualities, he was able to beat a uniform and disciplined Roman army. Likewise, when Genghis Khan was trying to unite his tribes, he took out a single arrow and snapped it over his knee. He then took a bunch of arrows, and this time they would not break. In other words, when combined and when united, it's a far more powerful force. And the beauty of Islam is that throughout the Islamic world, there is a core philosophy that we can all stick to. So you don't need reams of regulation, you just need good leadership to bring these institutions together. Because, of course, there is a danger of Islamic institutions fragmenting into Malaysia versus GCC and so on. Hopefully there will be a leader to bring these together. Now, another thing I find difficult in the Islamic finance business is to find information. Now, one of the ways that Western science, medicine and technology benefited was by publishing research. Now, I'm from an academic family, although I'm not one myself, and the idea is that when you study or produce your research, it immediately goes out to the public and your contemporaries for criticism, praise, or suggestions. And I don't find this with the fatwa, for example. Dr. Nagoka at the end has to go to different banks and get translations from Arabic to study fatwa. And I'd love to see this information publicly available online, and in that way, over time, the more the fatwa are viewed and studied by contemporaries, the more consistent and transparent they'll become. So any strange cases will immediately be seen to be non-compliant. And eventually, as you reduce the costs and increase the information, Islamic products will become cheaper. And by default, as the costs go down, their usage will go up. So looking at Andrew's chart earlier, I'm sure more and more Islamic investors will use these products. Another thing I'd like to see is an overall Islamic ratings agency. Not one to do with credit or credit ratings, but one that can judge the quality of Sharia compliance. And this is going to be very difficult with so many schools of Islamic thought. However, again, we have a very good example from history. Back in the 12th century, I believe, you had the House of Wisdom. Now, Islamic scholars were famous for preserving and conserving knowledge from the ancient world. Not only doing that, but actually studying it and improving on that information. And on top of that, passing it on and disseminating that data. So it's a very good worked example of how we could follow that sort of wisdom. And maybe this university could become a kind of production line for future scholars. So instead of having just a few scholars who are completely overworked and travelling all the time, maybe their workload could be shared by more junior staff who are studying to follow their footsteps. And this happens typically in the West as well, where top lawyers don't do all the work themselves. Their apprentices do the background job for them, and they do the final sign-off once they check it. Just very quickly on the personal side, as Dr. Turkestani was saying, a year ago I was a speculator. I was trading futures and commodities, and so I'm not trying to be holier than now in discussing my past. But what I did find was a blessing in disguise, is that when my boss went to go into politics and shut down the funds, I suddenly thought, well, why am I doing this? I don't enjoy having to trade every month to make a profit, month in, month out. I thought, well, I've already got the Islamic qualification, I really love the topic, why don't I try and use this and build on it? Because the philosophy is so good that this just shouldn't be for Muslim investors. Islamic finance should be for everybody. So I see my role as having to demystify the topic, write articles, and really get the idea out that Sharia is nothing to be scared of. When you see British newspapers, there's lots of anti-Islamic headlines. So instead, I'll have to almost disguise the idea, because often if you're trying to present a new concept to people, you'd have to sell the good parts of saying, actually you avoid gearing, you're sharing risk and reward. It's a very grown-up form of finance. I'm going to skip through the next few pages because they're about what I'm doing on the business side. But my core philosophy is that rather than chasing the wealthy investors, I'd like to offer Islamic finance to the retail and mid-market by offering diversified and low-cost funds. That means that anyone who works with me has to be on a profit share or have equity and share risk and reward. Even the lawyers I work with in Guernsey have agreed to go on equity, so it is possible. I just want to finish off with my personal goals for Guernsey. Now, Guernsey is a very small island situated between Britain and France, and it's been labelled a tax haven by various countries. And to some extent, they have been at fault in the crisis. Why? Because Guernsey is the home of very speculative investment products, like hedge funds, leveraged private equity, and even commercial property. Gearing abounds on our island. What I'd like to do is help Guernsey to transform and become an Islamic finance centre. We're in a perfect situation between Britain and France because both countries really want to get into the Islamic finance side, and perhaps we can help the Spanish as well. But also I was discussing this morning with some of the gentlemen of the university that Guernsey was home to an interest-free experiment over a period of 100 years. Almost all of our infrastructure, from roads, schools, and our market, were built without any private bank, without any interest-bearing debt. And this was done from a time of great crisis where we were virtually bloodless through interest, drawing out our wealth. And so, as the home of interest-free finance, I think we can evolve to do this again. We also found out a few weeks ago that Guernsey has its own gold mint. So there's a chance here that we could give our currency a precious metal backing, again to set a lead for the rest of the world. And finally, on my own personal goals, I'd like to create an Islamic bank, but I'd give it a bit of a Western name because, it's a bit like when you have children. When you're trying to feed them something which is good for them, but they don't like, or they say, oh, I've never had that before, I don't want to touch it. You've got to try and package it in a different way. So when I create Islamic funds, they will have a Western look, but lots of Sharia overtones. So Muslims will know what they are, but Westerners will sort of say, well, that's a useful product, that looks interesting. This guy's a Westerner. Oh, and he predicted the crash. Hopefully this will help them to invest in Islamic compliant products. And eventually, I believe that Islamic finance and investment will be very popular. And we know from the likes of Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote books like Tipping Point and Blink, that trends can take hold very, very quickly when the context and timing is right. And I think we're very close to that now. So just to summarise, I believe Islamic finance and funds are coming of age after many growing pains. But there needs to be an almost Western-style economies of scale and efficiency behind it. Not compromising in principles, but using that form of technology, never forgetting the ethical side to it. And I believe Sharia principles provide a positive protection. Now this means we shouldn't be looking for ways around it or looking for obscure hadith to justify a product, but just accept that this can't be done because it breaks the rules. It's that simple. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had a great deal of satisfaction from my studies of Islam and Islamic finance for the last couple of years, and it's made a great deal of difference to my life personally, and I'm just delighted this has happened. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Toby Birch.